Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Well, here we are. We're live streaming on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. My name is Tom Dutta. I'm the host of the Quiet Warrior Show. And in just a minute, we'll be actually kicking off a taping of the Quiet Warrior Show. And I have an amazing guest. Well, you'll see her right there on the screen, and I'll be introducing her in a moment. But everybody, I just want to tell you that you're jumping into the world of live streaming. We're literally interrupting the airwaves. And this broadcast will stay on the platforms of Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn as we tape it, so you'll be able to catch it even if you didn't hop on. We'll be producing this into the Quiet Warrior Show. It's an international podcast, and that'll come out in the near future, as well as a YouTube video that you'll be able to watch over and over again, because I promise you that you'll be inspired today. And so let me kick this off, everybody, so stand by. In 3, 2, 1. Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta. I am the Quiet Warrior. And I'm excited to have on my show today, Mejia Rodriguez. Carolina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be a part of this.
That's awesome. We've been offline back and forth communicating, and in a couple of your emails, you refer to yourself as Carol. Is it okay if I call you that? Or
Yes, of course.
All right. It's easier because it's less work.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, listen, this is all about you, and I want to tell everybody about how we met. We met through my author community, and actually a very good friend of mine down in the United States said, you got to check out this book. And I thought, great. And, most of the time when I get a book, everybody, I usually think it's an adult that's written it, because to be a published author is quite amazing. And then when I started reading it, I said, wow, this is an old soul who wrote this book. It's full of wisdom. It's so well written. And then I went, wait a minute, this author is 13 or 14 years old, and it got my heart. So I reached out to Carolina Rodriguez, and I said, you know what, let's do an interview. So it's just all about you, Carolina. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so glad we were able to meet as well. This has been such a great opportunity for me, and to be able to share my story on your platform, which is international as well, is such a blessing.
Absolutely. I'm so honored. And so this is kind of cool because I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, the west coast of our beautiful country. And where are you?
I'm in Colombia. I'm in the northern coast in Cartagena right now.
All right. I love that accent. We only see parts of that, the world, Colombia, Cartagena. We see it on movie in Hollywood. So it's pretty cool to know that you're there. So I want to ask you a question to start this off. This is kind of like, tell us something about yourself that you think most people don't know about you.
Well, after publishing my book, I'm quite surprised if there's something that people who've read it don't really know. But I've been a person that's moved ever since I was very little. I right now I'm in my 6th city. So I was born in Mexico, then the US, then Bogota in Colombia as well, Chile, and then Singapore, and now back to Colombia, but to a different city. So I've just had many changes and many opportunities to see the world. And I believe that's one of the main things that has built me, and that's one of the main defining factors of who I have become and am becoming.
Yeah, absolutely. We were saying just before the broadcast to each other, Carol, that it gives you called the word worldview. And when we have a worldview, we can teach people through the lens of different cultures. So I'm so inspired. And so I'm going to just build you up a little bit. I know you're humble, but I've got your bio in front of me here. So I'm just going to tell the audience a bit about the depth behind who you are. You're very old. You're like 14 years old. and yeah. Okay. I took one away from you there. It's just inspiring. So yes, so speaking 3 languages, living in 5 countries, and you do a lot of interesting things, organizing a successful annual fundraiser. You published your first book, which we're going to really get into. And I think at that time you were 13. Carolina's biggest passion lies in advocacy and education. And her purpose behind that is to create consciousness on issues that matter. I love that. We'll ask you more about that. you've been able to raise money for around the world. I call this the legacy or contribution part of what you're doing. And you're doing it for a group of children in need in Colombia called Las Estrellas del Rawad. I probably said that wrong, but you'll correct me. You've been doing that for 3 years or so, and the funds that you're collecting are from that fundraiser and also the royalties of your new book, which is called The Upside of Being Down, goes towards purchasing school supplies so those youth can continue their academic journeys. And then the last thing I wanted to say is that this is amazing. The media recognition you're getting is great. You've been featured twice on daytime Emmy-award-winning show Despierta America, creating consciousness about anorexia nervosa in teenagers. And we have a surprise coming up. Somebody told me through Facebook that on September 24th, something interesting is happening through a magazine. Tell me about that.
Yes, I was recently put in contact with the editors of Girl Story magazine, and they gave me the opportunity of writing an article for them, and we're going to publish my edition of the article on September 24th. So I'm very excited for the opportunity as well.
That's awesome. I'm going to capture that when we produce the show and make sure we put somewhere people can find that. But congratulations. Now, everybody, I just want to say this again, that what you're seeing is an interview with Carolina, and at 15 years old, think about the things that she's done. And this is just the beginning of her life. And my show is about the hero's journey narrative. And Joseph Campbell left us with that, Carolina, in that some things happen in our life and we hear the call to go on an adventure. Most people don't take that adventure, but sadly, the call happens sometimes when something not so good happens in our life. And so we go seeking and we discover and we come back with a purpose and we do something with it. Well, I'll tell you, the reason why you're here is because you've done so much with this story. So let's get into it. The book itself, I've read it from cover to cover. I thoroughly enjoyed it and recommend it. It's called The Upside of Being Down. Take us back in your story. I mean, you have 15 years that have happened in your life. Take us back to the beginning and take us up to the point where you discovered something about yourself that led you down this path to do a lot of things differently.
Yeah, definitely. So the story starts when I'm about 8 or 9 years old and I'm living in Bogota. And I start talking a little bit about the different changes little girls and boys and people of that age really start noticing as they start becoming like preteens and they start growing up. And those are the different social pressures that there are. There's a lot of judgment between peers. It's just those little snarky remarks and comments that little children start making towards each other, either because of insecurity or either because they just want to feel better, or there are many different reasons. But those comments sometimes have a bigger impact than what we give them credit to. And I kind of make those little comments and those moments, I see that as the beginning of what would later culminate into my diagnosis. And throughout some comments and like negative experience with peers, I grew up and they started developing many insecurities, which people don't talk about often because it's considered taboo. But I believe that by talking about it and being open about it, one can not only help empower other people, but it's also okay and it's good to accept that there are flaws within yourself, and that just leads to getting to a better place. So as I started realizing that there were certain insecurities about myself, I entered this stage in my life where the perfectionist in me decided, well, if you're thinking that you're overweight or that you're not happy about yourself, then you should do something about it. And unfortunately, I say that the eating disorder thoughts, because not myself, I believe that's a separate entity that in the end ended up affecting me. It led me down a path of this eating disorder, and it lasted for about 3 years. And in the book, I talk about the different thoughts that I had, what really makes an eating disorder such a grave illness, because apart from insecurities being taboos, eating disorders are also great insecurities. And it's amazing. As I was researching the book, there are so many people suffering with disordered eating, and it's not sometimes anorexia or bulimia. There are many different types of it. And by understanding that there shouldn't be stigma or prejudice surrounding eating disorders, I hope that people will feel more comfortable in seeking treatment and seeking help and just accepting that they're going through a difficult time.
Absolutely. Now, listen, I've never done this on my show live, and this is a credit to the work you're doing. Yeah, I honor you for sharing that part of your story. We're going to dig into it a bit more, but they say in the world of leadership, and you're a natural leader, but vulnerability or courage, I guess those two words, when I teach it, kind of connect. A lot of leaders, thought leaders, they don't want to share their story. They don't want to talk about that they're not okay for fear of shame. And so I'm happy to be in your life now because you're talking to somebody who struggled with his weight from when I was a little kid. Uh, if it's okay with you, I want to take a moment to tell you about that. And in my story, you're helping me through your story. So can I share a bit with you?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, when I grew up, if anybody's read my book, The Way of the Quiet Warrior, I published that book for a reason, to share my story. And as a man who's been in business, Carolina, and traveled a lot, when I was a kid, you said those little things and insecurities. I'm going like, well, yeah, that's me. But I was picked on. And I sadly, in my own home, my parents referred to me as fatso. And I remember my dad had a Ford F-350 truck, a big truck. My dad was in the Army. He's a military commanding officer. And we used to go for drives on a Sunday. And there was at the corner somewhere, there was this tire shop. And I don't know if you're familiar with the character, the Michelin Man. But the Michelin Man, if you Google it, it's actually a kind of a cutesy caricature of he's all white, and his body looks like a bunch of tires stacked on each other, and he looks really fat. And my dad, the place was called Pinchins, the garage, and my dad would slow the car down. My two brothers were in the back seat, my mom in the front, and he'd say, "Hey, look, there's Tommy." And those things at that young age with me, this is a part I learned about brain science, and I'll give it back to you in a minute to talk about this. We know that up to about age 20, we don't have the use of what's called the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that can pause and have a thought about our thoughts. So back then, I never could think about what does he mean by that. And in fact, when we don't have the use of that part of the brain, Carolina, our brain believes everything it's told, and it stores it in our unconscious mind. So I was called fat and this and that. And so when I started looking in the mirror, that's all I saw. And it actually manifested itself in my life, even as I went into business. My wife and I are married 25 years now. I hope one day you meet Anna. She's from Italy.
Yeah.
And my wife would tell you that I would have a shower and never want to uncover. I would never want her in the room when I was showering. And when I was a kid in high school, I was always the last to come into the locker room to get dressed, and undressed, and the last to leave, because I was fearful of taking off my shirt. So when I read your book, I went, wow, I wish I had met you when I was younger, because it really put me into the story and understood about when you went through your experiences. I realize now that it could have been a lot worse for me. And so today I still deal with that and manage my own self-worth and all that. So let's get back and turn it to you here. I want to ask you, just to keep going with the story. You said there were some little insecurities and things. Just tell me specifically a couple things that maybe someone or people might have said to you that made you start feeling that maybe the way you looked wasn't the way it should.
Yeah, as you said, it was just these simple and small comments that maybe the person saying them never really realized that they could have such a big impact. And that's why I always say, like, you should really watch your words, because you have much more power than you really believe you do. And it could have been comments from girls in my grade saying that, oh, that uniform is a bit too tight on you. You look a little too squished. Or from certain friends or family members that saying, oh, you've gained weight, haven't you? Mind you, I was around 9 or 10 years old. It's not something that I was thinking about all the time. But because of these comments, I started thinking about it all the time. And as you mentioned it and you worded it perfectly, we young people are just not equipped to understand and digest that kind of information in a healthy way.
Absolutely. And you nailed it. And here's the thing, it's a teaching moment, everybody on the show. I want to make sure if people watching this come back to this and listen to Carol and the last conversation we had, that words matter. And they rule us. And as children, and I'm going to now jump into the world of being a parent. And I know I've met one of your parents through Facebook because they said hi and said thanks for your support. It sounds like your dad is a wonderful man, and he's a businessman. He travels, you've told me. But what we say to our children, and psychologists now are starting to say that when we parent our children, we need to separate the behavior from the child. And so let me just explain that quickly. That if I say, Carol, uh, I, you're bad because of this, or at that age, your brain thinks you're bad. But if I say, Carol, I love you, but that thing you did, I don't like that. That's bad. I need you to change that. Then the brain can start separating. Okay, dad loves me. He doesn't like it that I just threw pop on his new computer. And so you see what I'm saying there. And so you are such a treasure because you discovered this through your own experience. So I want to keep going with that deeper into the story. So when I read the book, I was like, my heart went into my mouth and I'm going like, oh my God. Uh, at what age were you when you started not eating intentionally? Just take me back into that part of the story.
Yeah, so I was around 10 or 11 years, I think I was 11 years old. And my whole process with disordered eating or just taking into action these insecurities was starting to exercise a lot. And I exercised because I was saying, oh, this is the way to lose weight. Maybe this will make me more acceptable. Maybe this will help me make more friends. Just trying to ease those insecurities and connect them with weight loss, which I later learned there's no connection between your weight and your acceptability or your worth. But it started that way. And then I realized that exercise wasn't enough. So then I started decreasing my portion sizes and exercising more. So it was a complete unbalance of eating less and moving more. And then my body weight went down so much that it was not healthy anymore. So then my parents took me to a doctor, and we had to go through this process of restoring my weight and also working on the psychological component of this illness, because if one doesn't work on one's insecurities, then it's very likely that one will fall in the same patterns again. So I'm very thankful that I had a very strong support system, and not only my family but the doctors as well, that they just helped me kind of process what I was going through, realize that there was no shame in what I was going through, and help me start my recovery process.
Well, that's fantastic, and it's in the book in great detail about the actual. I won't call it therapy, but the process you use. I'm going to ask you that in just a moment to talk about it. There was actually a 3-letter acronym, and it involved the family. But when you read the book, you really, everybody, get into the resistance that Carolina had about getting help. I mean, you weren't going in there saying, yeah, I need help. You were kicking and screaming. And I know we honor and love our parents. I mean, I love both my parents, and my father passed away in 2018 unexpectedly. And I discovered the gifts that he gave me later in life became my strength. But, in reading your book, there were challenges between you and your mom, and her love and her caring for you, and then the struggle you were having. You guys were butting heads a little bit. And I just remember reading, and I was going to read the book passage, but I'll just say, and correct me when you take it back from me, that there was a moment where your weight got so low, and then your mom said you needed to get to see the doctor. And I remember reading it, and you resisted. And there was a moment in that room where you were asked to do something. It was taking off your clothes, and then something happened after that where they asked you a question. Tell me about that, because that really was a heartbreaking, and I would say the turn in the story for me, where you saw yourself for the first time and you had to acknowledge what you saw in front of the doctor.
Yeah, so that moment specifically was after my parents had told me that I was going to see a nutritionist and that I had no say in it. And so we went, and the first thing the doctor did was to check all my vitals. And then she asked me to look at myself in a mirror and ask me what I saw. And I remember not seeing anything out of the ordinary. I thought, well, I have a certain bulge in my belly, or I just didn't really see what they were seeing. And then I looked to the other side, and my mom had her hands on her head, on her face, and she was like, I I can't believe that we have gotten to this point, because my weight was so low that it was not healthy. And I never really saw that for myself because I was blinded by that type of body dysmorphia. Um, but you also mentioned that there was a bit of tension between especially my mother and I, and it was founded upon the idea that she was desperate for me to get better. And part of me at the beginning was like, I don't have an issue. I'm not sick. There's nothing wrong with me. But once we went to the doctor and we saw that change, I was finally able to admit that I had a problem. And the only way to get better is to admit that you have a problem in the first place. So once
Yeah.
that happened, my mom and I, we were always quarreling about food. And it was mainly based on those thoughts that I had, that I was just scared of what certain foods would do to me if they would like make my weight increase, or that they would diminish my worth. It was just a very tense time, but it all really came from a place of love and worry. And that's something I've accepted and admitted now, that everything that happened during those years was, we've grown from it, most definitely. And now I have a wonderful relationship with both my parents, and I'm so grateful for all their help. But it all came from a place of, we have to do something to get better. And as my mom said, she was always in solution mode. So if you need to get better, you needed to eat, I was going to eat. And there was just no way past that. So it's just this complex dynamic of my mom trying to fight against those eating disorder thoughts, and the eating disorder thoughts fighting back as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I encourage everybody to get the book and read it. And that dynamic, it's a dynamic that plays out in many mother-daughter, mother-son relationships. And I remember when I was younger, and unfortunately, there was some tension between my mom and I too. And but in your case, your mother, it from appears from the book, was loving and nurturing. She showed it in the way of trying to fix and help you. My mom contributed to the problem, and she didn't know it by making me feel that I wasn't worthy with the way I looked, and she didn't even know she was doing that. She was actually acting out her frustration because my dad was such a bad drinker and her life wasn't happy. So we go back again and we take the lesson of words matter. It's such a great point you made. And I want to just say this to you, that it's funny because when I was telling you about my own weight challenges, even today when I look in the mirror, if I've put on a couple pounds, it looks to me like it's 20 pounds.
Mhm.
And so I want to use this as another teaching moment, because you inspired me that in studying the brain, I had to study all this to understand it. We have millions of neurons in our brain that are wired with thoughts and emotions. And so when I look in the mirror, my brain says, "What's that?" And it goes looking in my subconscious mind into these neural nets, these patterns of thoughts, and it sees fat and not good looking. And it still does that. I have to convince myself. My wife Anna, she said, "You're such a good looking guy," when she met me, and I couldn't see it. What's interesting is when now my weight's 166. I was 198 a few years ago, and I lost a lot of weight, but I yo-yo with it. And so I've had to retrain myself to say, you know what, looking in the mirror, you're love, you're good, everything's fine. And so that the brain actually is like plastic. It's called neuroplasticity. And I learned through my own therapy that you can actually teach your brain to think differently. Animals and plants can't, but we can actually, Carolina, and you may know this, have a thought about our thoughts. So I can say, look in the mirror and say, "Ugly guy," but then my prefrontal cortex goes, "Wait a minute, stop. Think about the facts. You're not an ugly guy. Look at this and look at that." So for me, it's a lifelong journey. What I was fascinated by in the book is the chasm between anorexia and a guy like me who just struggled with binge eating because it was like chocolate sugar, and then all of a sudden starvation, not eating a lot. Where is that? Help us understand, where's that sort of line between anorexia and just being somebody who just doesn't eat because they want to lose weight?
Yeah, I think that's a interesting question, and it's difficult for me to answer. Not, I think that would be really best directed towards professionals, but from what I understand, the difference is that you don't know where to stop when you suffer with disordered eating. Normally when some people are on diets to lose weight, or they exercise more to lose weight and stuff, there's a certain goal and there's a stopping line. But when you're overwhelmed with those insecurities and you don't value yourself, you don't love yourself, there really isn't a limit to, oh, I don't know how to control food and binge eating disorder or anorexia, where just no weight is enough. Thinner is better. And so there's just that lack of control and of being able to control and stop it. So I think that's the main difference from what I've been able to understand.
No, that's well said, and it makes a lot of sense. And everybody, when you come back to this part of the show, listen to it again about that. It's a teaching moment. That how do you know something's wrong? The analogy to me, Carol, is that my dad became an alcoholic, but there's people who drink, but my dad couldn't stop. So that's the line when you can't stop. And so thank you for clarifying that with me. There was one line in the book, and I'm not laughing at it. It's just like, oh, when I was a kid in school, I did book reports. And I used to write a lot. I guess, here we are as fellow authors, and go figure, we have a gift. And I did a book report on dinosaurs, and my dinosaur was Tyrannosaurus Rex. And there was an incredible moment in your book where you said something about you saw the back of your neck, and there were like on a dinosaur vertebrae sticking out. What was your lowest weight?
My lowest weight, I'm not quite sure specifically what it was. I really try not to focus on the number itself,
Yeah,
because I realize that it comes a lot with that obsessive type of thinking of
yeah.
trying to categorize how sick you are with how thin you are. And it's really interesting that you bring that up, because there's a big misconception with eating disorders that there has to be a certain weight or you have to be really thin to suffer from anorexia. And that's not the case. And it's a big problem, because some people go and seek treatment and doctors refuse them, saying, no, you're not thin enough. You do not suffer from anorexia. And it's, as you mentioned, that anorexia is not really about the weight. It's more of not being able to stop and control, just with that analogy you just made.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. So that's really interesting to me. So thank you for clarifying that. There's a couple things in the book, or a lot in the book, about them. And I smiled when I read it, about the things you would do to sort of try to cheat and not eat your food. Like, just give us a couple of those. When you were served food, sometimes you do things to try to fake it and pretend
Yeah,
like you're actually.
yeah. I talk about it a lot more in my book, but I'd ask my mother for concessions and say, please serve a little less. It was just the eating disorder trying to manipulate its way through eating less, and trying to seek that worth that I was not allowing myself to have. I was not allowing myself to love myself and respect myself despite any type of weight. So it was an interesting experience, and I look back at it now and I realize that part of the person who had to kind of, I don't know, act that certain way to lose weight or just to not increase weight, which was what I was focused on. It was really the eating disorder manipulating its way through like my life, because there's a big difference between me and those certain thoughts, because I am not the person that lies or manipulates or just or acted those ways. But because I suffered with this, we were compelled to act certain ways and say certain things that most definitely now in recovery, it's not there anymore. And that truly points that eating disorders are an illness that have to be taken seriously. And it's not just something related to vanity or narcissism, because many people think that eating disorders is just to get thinner or look a certain way, and that it's not that way at all. For me, as I talked to you before, I've moved all my life. I've always lacked a certain kind of control, and I'm a perfectionist. And the way that I kind of expressed this lack of control was through controlling my food. Um, so it's important to educate oneself and realize that eating disorders are much more than vanity. Sometimes they're not even related to that. And that's one of the main reasons why I wrote this book, because I was very insecure about sharing my story, and I wasn't sure how people would react to it. But my decision in publishing the story was to show that first of all, eating disorders are a serious illness that should be taken seriously. Second of all, it's not about vanity, and it's not about people being self-absorbed. There's many different things that build up a diagnosis. And third of all, that there's really no shame in sharing your story, empowering others, and at the same time, empowering yourself.
Wow. So, and where did you learn to speak? I mean, you got such a great vocabulary. Even I'm going to make an announcement in a minute, a couple announcements actually that are going to make you smile. One you know about, but you wrote something for me recently, and I got it back and went, wow, I mean, you're so well spoken. And so I'm proud of you. I love you and your story. I know your parents are proud of you. And I want to make a few more comments and then get into a thread of mental health on this, that you so nailed it, in that going back to me, and I tell stories so that we connect to the heart, right? Your story and mine, we're like brother, sister now. I'll always be there beside you and you're like a mentor to me. I just want to tell you, it's like I wrote down on my paper, my age of 56 minus 15. It's like, where were you 40 years ago in my life? And I think the gift of you writing your book is that when I wrote my book, I was afraid of what people would think. I was fearful of putting my true story out. Now, my circumstance was different. As a CEO, I mean, I ran companies. You never see people who are running companies publicly talk about things like, their childhood and whatnot. But the reason why I did it, which is why I admire you, is I wanted to tell the story to teach people, to have others say that your story is my story and give you hope. And when I read your story, here's the thing, Carol, you probably didn't know this, but I went, your story is my story. It didn't become an illness to the point where I had anorexia. But I want to go into mental health for a minute. They say you used a great word, which was comparison, or something about self-esteem or self-worth. And let me tell you what I learned, and then you can talk to me about it. I want to give it back to you. And that the way human beings value their self, most people, they do it by comparing to others. That's why, thank goodness, you're not on Facebook, because if you're on Facebook, you're looking for how many likes did somebody put there, and then you feel good about yourself, and then you see a story about somebody else wrote a book and it was this, and you go, oh my God, I didn't do enough. And so what happens is bullying is another thread in my story. I was bullied when I was younger for the color of my skin and for the shape of my body, and you name it. And I don't say that for pity. I say it because now I'm an advocate to eradicate bullying with love. And the thing is that when you are a bully, you tear other people down because you yourself are insecure. So you can tear somebody else down so that you can see that you're better than them. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's really when people say things, they're actually insecure. They're not better than us. But as I said, the brain doesn't know the difference. So we take it in and we believe it. And that's what really was interesting to me about the journey you took with anorexia, is that the build up, it was a great choice of words. I'm going to write that down in my notes later. The build up in my story was hearing from others who were supposed to love and nurture me that I wasn't good enough, and being described in a certain way. But there was more. In the environment I lived in, which was my childhood, a toxic father, being a drinker. And my dad, by the way, when he passed away, just so I want you to know this, he would have loved you. It was 22 years sober, just a great man. And he was actually a hero. I didn't know all the things he had done in his life to help people because I had been disconnected. But anyway, so it was my environment. It was what was going on at home. And remember, the prefrontal cortex, my rational brain didn't understand the difference between my words, my voice, truth or false. So everything just went into me. It's like, that's you. That's your life. And then there was some bullying. And then you said something about travel. This is an interesting one. My daughter's 22 now. I shared that with you. Her name's Kalinda. We call her Callie. So Carol's going to meet Callie one day. Callie's in the book, by the way. And we'll talk about that too, my book. And for 5 years, I was on an airplane. And so when I became a CEO for the first time, I was 31 years old, and I traveled Canada, US. And I remember I used to say, I want to be a frequent father, not a frequent flyer. And so, yeah, and so I was not involved as much in my daughter's life. What I realized later when she went to university, and I'm sharing this with a lot of love for her, is that she went away and we had a conversation. She said something to me and I had a tear in my eye. She said, well, you weren't there anyway. And what I didn't realize is that it's important for parents, even if they're traveling and abroad, to find a way to play a role in their children's lives, because the impact of being absent as a parent can have an effect. Sometimes children think, "Oh, you're not here because it's my fault," and that wasn't your case. Uh, this I want to get into the treatment plan. It was a 3-letter acronym where it was involved your family, and your dad
Yeah.
did something amazing. He canceled all of his trips and things to make that work. So just tell me about that quickly.
Yeah, so in Singapore, I started a treatment called family-based treatment, and it was what helped me recover. So it was first based on recovering weight and just getting back to that healthy area where you had energy and all the eating disorder symptoms went away. And then it focused on the thoughts and the insecurities and everything. But throughout this whole process, it wasn't just individual therapy treatment. It involved the whole family. And I will forever be grateful to my parents and my dad, who he was working at the time. He was also, because of him, we've moved all around the world. And when he saw that we were in a tight situation, the whole family was, he decided that he was going to take a step back from his work and support us. And I'm really amazed at the strength that took to be able to prioritize and understand what things were truly important in family in life. And he chose family. And that's not what a lot of people do, because it's hard to step back from responsibilities or jobs and stuff. And he did. And that decision that he took to support me and support us not only helped me quickly recover, but it also created a wonderful bond between us. And now I'm very happy and relieved to say that I have such a great connection with both my parents, and that I'm just so grateful to have had supportive parents that were always there looking to support me, to love me, to try and help me recover. I've just been very lucky in that sense, because I know that some people suffering from anorexia or eating disorders, they don't really have that support because of the stigma, because of the stereotypes surrounding eating disorders. And I will say it again, I'm just so grateful to have had them and still have them because they've been a great support.
I tell you, if your parents, well, they'll see this. I'm sure that their heart's going to grow, like in my favorite cartoon, the Christmas show, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, where his heart grew 3 times. You're so wonderful. I mean, just listening to you, love flows out of you, and I think that's a really important point. I want to build on that. Parents supporting the people through challenges, whether it's children or not, it's so important. I didn't have that, and it's unfortunate, but I found other ways. And your dad travels, and that's the thing I've tried to explain to my daughter, and I want you to hear this from me, that it's the hardest thing for fathers and mothers when they have careers that take them away, and we don't realize the impact it might have, and we're not very good at explaining it. And sometimes I wonder, did my daughter know I was doing that to pay the mortgage and help out? And we feel sometimes guilt about it. And so today, with the apps they have, like FaceTime and all these apps where you can video conference, it makes virtual parenting a little bit easier. What I used to do is I used to book on my calendar. I had my assistant put every date that was important to my daughter on it. And I got to a point in my life, Carol, where I said to my assistant, I said, nobody takes that time unless they ask me. So I got better at it. And so I want to honor your father and your mother on this show again. I hope to meet them. I'll meet you someday. I know that. Wonderful. We're getting close to the end of the story here. There's so much, and everybody, you've got to get the book, The Upside of Being Down. I'm ranting about it for a reason, and it's all in there. You do some things to create a legacy for children. We talked about. Just tell me about that.
Yes. So around 3 years ago, I was living in Singapore, and we had a school project where it was called Try Time, and it was really just as the name sounds. It was a specific area in our school day to try stuff and to look for our passions. And I started realizing through research and through reading that one of my biggest passions is just education. That I've realized that I have gotten so much in my life, and I have been able to create connections with other people and learn and know new stuff through education. And coming from, my parents and my family members are from Colombia, and coming from a third world country, you realize that there is a lot of poverty. Many people that really do not have access to that education. And I believe that education is really just the main source of solving problems. If we want to have a sustainable future, if we want to have a successful community, we need to start through educating people, through empowering people, through advocacy. And so from Singapore, I started a GoFundMe page called Dancing for a Dream. And there we started fundraising for a group of children here in Cartagena called Las Estrellas del Rawad. And they're a group of dancers that they live, they have poor economic resources. And this group was created in order to keep the children out of the streets and out of getting in those unhealthy habits. And through dance, they just put their passions in dance, and they're incredible dancers. Their talent is out of this world. And with the funds, we've been able to raise money so that we can buy school supplies and they can continue their academic journey. Because although they put their passions into dance, they also should put their passions into academics and education, because all of those minds that there are, even if they're in the rural sides of the city, or they simply do not have the resources to, they deserve the chance to prove themselves, to educate themselves, of showing their worth. And I just believe that that's one of the most wonderful things that we've been able to do with this money. And I'm just so grateful to have the opportunity to work with them as well.
Well, I'm sure they're incredibly grateful to you. I want to tell you, there was a study done. I teach this. I'm a trainer, and I teach business people and about communication and things like that. And there's a study that was done with 90-year-olds. It's a Canadian study, and they asked these 90-year-olds, "What are your top 3 regrets at this point in your life?" And when everything came in, Carolina, not in any order of importance, off the top of my head, the one was we didn't reflect enough. 2, didn't take enough risk. And 3, didn't leave a big enough contribution or legacy. And I don't know if you know this, but a lot of people go to their grave, they live a good life, but they never do anything to leave a legacy or contribution. And I've studied a lot through people like Tony Robbins, who you might have heard of, who's a teacher and a mentor. And Tony taught me that there are a list of basic human needs, and love is one. But there's 2 on that list that if you have to have at least one of them, and one of them is contribution, and the other one, I believe, is spirituality. So you, at your age, you're teaching us. I mean, look at what you've done today. I'm so proud of you. At age 15, and before that, even starting this, that came from your heart. Nobody told you to do that. And remember, I told you earlier that why I'm so proud of this story in you is that you have a worldview. Many people who have never been to parts of the world where there's no education available to some, where they take school supplies for granted. I mean, some of us here in North America, I hate to say it because I feel guilty now, is that my pencils would get dull and I'd just throw them away and thinking, oh, mom and dad will buy me a new set. I was like, come on. And so way to go. And I want to tell you that from here on in, we're connected now as Quiet Warriors. I want to help you in some way with the work you're doing. So always reach out for share ideas, whatever it is. That is just awesome. So everybody just think about that. What can you do, even if you're young watching this, to give back? And I want to tell you, I'm proud of my daughter in one way, that she, in her high school, started the first recycling program. And she's got a big connection. Yeah, so I want her to hear this interview and maybe meet you, but she has a connection to the planet in a way that you do to your cause. And in some way, I think, because I'm skilled in seeing people through the lens of their motives and the hero's journey, that some way you're actually looking at the tribe of children for a reason, connected to your story, connected to your adversity. And I think that's just powerful. As you got to the other side of this, one of the things I recognize in the book is that, the battle's not over, right? It's a battle of the mind. For the rest of your life, you'll manage your health, and you'll manage your eating, and even your mental health, which is amazing. So just tell me a few things you do that light you up, that keep you feeling good.
Yeah, no, definitely. Things like this, and I think everyone can relate to this, is that one always has to be checking in with oneself, seeing, am I doing okay? Am I happy? Am I at peace? And I think that's something we're all going to battle with, and keeping ourselves strong and in a good space mentally. And it's not as easy as it sounds. But what I really try to do, and I say try because it's sometimes hard, um, but mindfulness has really helped me of not letting my mind race to the future or go backwards and kind of think and overthink my actions. Just realizing that right now I'm in a good place. I'm surrounded by my family, which I'm so grateful for. My mom, my dad, my brother, my cousins, my aunts. It's just, I'm so grateful to have a support system. And in knowing and realizing and accepting that I'm okay right now, it's just easier to say, if I'm okay right now, then I will be okay tomorrow, and I'll be strong enough to keep on being okay. And I think that's it. Really, thinking like that gives me a great amount of peace and a great amount of happiness to know that if you keep on working on yourself and loving on yourself and pursuing your passions, then it's going to be okay.
I just that should become part of a inspirational, motivational tape. Just the way you speak. You notice if you watch his back, you the smile on my face. By the way, you should know I'm my personality type in my book. If you read it, it's called a blue personality. So my motive, how I live, is through intimacy, through emotion. I mean, I wear it on my sleeve. That's why I talk so much. But these muscles don't work very well. I don't smile very much. Even my baby picture, my mom goes, "You're always sad." So you notice when you were talking, and I saw inflection in your face. You just light up when you're talking about your passions and that. And I think never lose that. Uh, I'm going to tell you this to you: you are enough. You are love. You always were. And it doesn't matter what you are, what education you have, what you do for others. That you are, let me just say, you're a picture, you're a beacon of light and hope. It's amazing to me. I'm a bit of a faith-based guy. I believe God walks in your life and is working through you to teach, and that's why you and I connect on our stories. That's pretty cool. A couple more things here. I want to make this announcement I've been talking about. Actually, two of them. The first one is something magical happened for me when I reached out to you and I said, "Would you write something and be in my next book?" And you are going to be my next book. Everybody, the next book is being written, and it's an illustrated book. My co-author is Donna Setterland out of USA, and it's an illustrated book, a picture book, but it's over 100 pages. It's about mental health. It's called The Quiet Warrior Teaches Genie. And Kara, you wrote something that's incredible. And we're publishing that in my book, and we're actually illustrating it with beautiful illustrations, and you've seen a bit of that. So I want to honor you with that because I've only chosen 15 people that I know in the world to be in that book. And where that book goes, your story goes. So thank you so much for doing that. And then I want to honor you with a few what I call leadership words. Do you ever think of yourself as a leader?
Um, Honestly, that's a good question. I've never really considered myself as a leader, but I don't know. I really haven't
Well,
really thought of.
yeah, no, I understand. I mean, maybe at age 15, you don't see yourself that. I want to tell you what I teach because in the training I do, I teach the definition of a leader is someone who creates other leaders. And the definition of a leader can also be to keep it simple so that people can follow you. And so in reading your book and what you've done, and even the way you speak about your journey through anorexia, but even life, it's easy to follow you. There's a great TED talk which you can find, and it's actually about a guy, it's one person who's dancing, and then all of a sudden it grows and grows and grows, and everybody's dancing on the side of this hill. I think it's called Dancing Guy on the Hill or something. And in that, they talk about the concept of having a first follower. So you know what a first follower is? A first follower, if you're a leader, your first follower is the person you're going to infect with what you know and teach, who have similar values so that they can infect the world. So I want to tell you that in Canada, I am your first follower. You've infected me now with your energy and your knowledge and your love. So I'm going to, for the rest of my life, carry your story. I want you to know that.
Much. I'm
And
so grateful for your kind words. It's really an honor to talk to you, an honor to work with you. I'm just so grateful for the opportunity of contributing to your story as well. And I'm so grateful for your kind words as well. It really does mean a lot to me. And it shows that through the process, through writing the book and everything, it really does have an impact. And I'm just so thankful. So thank you.
Well, thank you. So now I'm going to honor you with 4 leadership words. I've been looking at my paper, as you can see here. People listening to this later won't see that. I do this. It's not scripted. It's based on what I feel and what you say. The first word is courage. You are courage. The second one is brave. You're brave, and I guess brave and courageous go together, to share your story, to talk openly about it. Very inspiring. The third one is inspiration. You are an inspiration, and I know you know this, but there's another word below that called humility. And I'm not sure if you've been told that, but someone with humility makes it about the other person. They don't have an ego. They're not arrogant. And you inspire others because of your humility. And so I'm going to now induct you into the Quiet Warrior tribe. I didn't tell you I was going to do this publicly, but bear with me. I'll ramble for a moment. You see in the back image behind me on my screen there? Can you see that? All right. Now that's the picture of what's called a challenge coin. And a challenge coin, it originated in World War I, where soldiers carried them to commit to each other in community. And these are actual physical coins. And, you know, back then, if you didn't have yours, Carol, and we got together, you'd buy drinks or dinner. Today, challenge coins are used all over the world for community. My dad was in Alcoholics Anonymous for 22 years. They have a challenge coin. First responders have those. And so I went through the United States and had these handcrafted and painted and designed. The front of it, what you see is an image of the show. And if I move this way, you see that guy there? He looks familiar. That's me. Although I had hair back then because we weren't in COVID-19. And so it's raised. And on the back is actually the crest or the illustration of the hero's journey, the journey that you've taken and I'm on. And it comes in a cherry box. We'll have to find a way to get it to you. But welcome to the Quiet Warrior tribe.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, these are now carried in 7 countries. My vision for this was when I started my show to have them carried around the world, but only 50 or less go out a year. And in a planet of 8 billion people, that's an honor. I want you to know. So you are now connected to all those other people. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you can hear their stories, and we'll help each other throughout the world. So the last word's going to come from you. I mean, we've done almost an hour here. I want it to be long with you so we can have lots to listen to later. Tell everybody where they can get your book. Hold it up, brag about it. Tell us where they can get a hold of you.
So
hold it up again. Hold
it
up again. All right. Beautiful cover. All right. Tell us more.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to Morgan James, our publisher, for really believing in the process and in the purpose of the book. They've helped the book reach anywhere really where books are sold. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. I have a website, and it's called The Upside of Being Down, and you can check it out there. There's more information. We're also on Instagram at the.upside of being down. There's also more information there. And once again, I'm just thankful to Morgan James for realizing this vision and helping us get this story around the world.
All right, that's awesome. So last words, any advice you want to give to anyone in the world who's, dealing with anorexia?
Yeah, something that I think is really important is to realize, first of all, that you're not alone. And although it may seem that you're alone, there's a lot of people that share your worries. But there are a lot of people that are also there to support you and to help you through it. And you just need to find those people that will help you. Another thing is that there's no shame in having suffered through an illness, because at the end of the day, you're a survivor and you're a person who's become much stronger and much more powerful than before. So I think that there's value in going through experiences like these and coming out on the other side a stronger person. So it's just seeing your strength, knowing who to rely on, and at the end of the day, really loving yourself.
That's wonderful. I had a thought again. My brain's 3-dimensional, you probably figured, and I'm going on all these journeys and TED Talks. I told you, and I think you saw it. Thank you so much. My TED Talk, my first one, I encourage you to consider doing one at some point. Because a TED Talk is the theme behind TED Talks, as you probably know, is about an idea worth spreading. And you got something there. You're so well spoken. And then I wrote this down on my paper. Maybe it's something I coined that you can steal. I wrote down the word CAN, C-A-N. You can. CAN stands for Conquer Anorexia Nervosa. So that's my. Yeah, so you can have that. You can have that. You can borrow it, steal it, whatever. But you can, and everybody, you can too. So thank you for listening to the Quiet Warrior Show, everyone. I want to ask you to go out and find the podcast on your favorite podcast channel. Give it a high rating to honor this show. Download it so that Carolina can get known. And find that true passion like you hear from Carolina. Live life with purpose and live the life that you deserve and desire. Thank you, Carolina.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, stand by. We're going to end the broadcast. Just stay online.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca